You've lived a great life and done well for yourself. But what mark will you leave on the world? How will you inspire future generations? Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand have helped thousands of people answer exactly those questions. If you've ever wondered, what will be my legacy? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Stan and Katie Beth.
Hey everyone, this is Stephen Ting with Legacy Stories podcast, and today I'm excited to have Dan Simon join us. Dan is with Simon Mediation. He practices specifically in the estate planning field and specializes in family mediation. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, great. So we're going to have some fun today. We're going to chat with Dan, and he's going to share with us a little bit about his expertise and maybe give us a little bit of feedback. But we're going to turn back the hands of time a little bit. And Dan, maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about why you went to law school. Why did you decide to go to law school?
Oh boy, for me, Stephen, that was just lack of any really bright ideas about what I wanted to do. That was right after college. That was kind of by default, I must say. You know, I didn't end up practicing law very, very long. I got into this mediation thing pretty soon after. I practiced law very briefly. And so, you know, you said that I'm in the estate planning field. I don't know that I'd exactly call it that. I'm in the conflict management field, which often includes discussions around estates that often where the planning hasn't been done so well and dealing with the aftermath of that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So why specifically this field?
Well, you know, I became clear when I was practicing law that a lot of what we were doing had emotional and psychological components to it that litigation wasn't so helpful at addressing. And so I actually went back to school thinking I would become a therapist for a while. And so I got a master's in counseling psychology. But when I quit my law firm job and went back to school, somebody suggested that I take a training in mediation, which I did. And then by the time I finished my master's in counseling, I decided that practicing mediation was what I wanted to do. I also became aware of a specific approach to mediation called Transformative Mediation, which is a bit different from what maybe any lawyers out there or anybody who's been involved in litigation has experienced. Transformative mediation really takes into consideration that these are very personal, very relational situations where it's about the bottom line to a certain extent. It is about, you know, solving a problem or dividing up some assets, but it's very personal. It really has to do with people feeling disrespected by each other or mistreated in some way. And so there's emotional stuff happening in a big way. And so the transformative approach really kind of allows for people to get to a better place with how they're relating to each other.
Yeah, and I could see that most people aren't familiar with that. I'm glad you're able to expand on that a little bit. Tell us a little bit about how Simon Mediation came about, how this firm was essentially created. Yeah.
Well, yeah, this firm makes it sound a little bit like a bigger deal than it is, honestly, Stephen. It's me. I collaborate with some people when it comes to putting on the trainings that I put on. I teach people to mediate as well as mediating itself. Occasionally, I have a co-mediator, but it's large. The firm is me. And as I said, it came about back in 1998 when I first became aware of the transformative approach to mediation. And I became aware that it wasn't really being practiced. I started in Minnesota. Now I'm both in Minnesota and Southern California, and it just wasn't happening. It's really not happening much still in either place. And so I just became aware there was room to provide something that really could genuinely help people get through their conflicts in a way they felt really good about, not necessarily just a compromise where everybody goes away dissatisfied, but a really meaningful conversation where they actually, you know, feel good about how they took care of themselves and also like they treated each other decently. And maybe, you know, in the case of families and estates, you know, maybe they're able to salvage a relationship with their siblings after all, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So on that note, who would you say is your ideal client?
Honestly, my favorite ones are the ones that really seem hopeless because, then I get to be kind of a bigger hero when it turns out that it wasn't hopeless. And the reality is it never is hopeless. If people are feeling really discouraged, really hurt, really disrespected by their sibling, that's actually a good sign. It means they care. It means that there is something that can be corrected, and it's often mutual. If both siblings or all four siblings, or three siblings and the sister-in-law are all, and perhaps the widow, are really angry, that just means that it is personal. They do want to be seen as a valuable part of the family. They want to be valued for the relationship they had with often the deceased person whose estate is being talked about. They care about a lot of stuff very deeply. And so if they are willing to engage in a process where they have some conversations, good things usually do happen. And it's not necessarily easy, it's painful. And it involves kind of going through some trauma and some hard stuff, but there just really is hope. They really can get to the other side, and they all want to. Nobody likes the bad vibes with the family. They would prefer to be in a good place with their family members. So there is that energy, there is that desire, there's that motivation to get to a better place.
Yeah, certainly that's a different aspect of estate planning. And as you mentioned, I mean, it's the emotional side, right? It's
Yeah.
the personal side. And so, and it's probably just as important, if not more important, when it comes to settling estates, right? So, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm glad we're able to get some of that feedback from you.
sure.
Where would these clients generally find you?
Awareness has grown about the existence of mediation. And so I do often get called directly by a family member who has done a little of their own research. And now, in Southern California in particular, now there are more lawyers who have taken my courses. I teach these 20 or 30-hour courses in mediation. And so some name recognition exists among some estate planning attorneys now that, if they've been through my course, if I've had 20 or 30 hours with them, I've managed to indoctrinate them pretty well on the value of this sort of conversation. And so, they'll let me know that there's a situation that they want some help with. Yeah, both lawyers and the parties themselves are able to find me. Yeah.
Yeah, good. So you've touched on areas where you can help people with. What are some of the misconceptions in your field?
Hmm.
So things that people aren't generally aware of or have misunderstandings about. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, I hate to assume what anybody out there is thinking. I guess, the way that I often see it differently from some other professionals that I run into is, sometimes there is the assumption that it is just about money. And
Hmm.
money is involved usually in these conversations I'm a part of, but it really, the experience of the family members is something like, hey, I just want my dad's wishes to be carried out. That's all I want. I don't care about this money. My sibling, now they just care about the money. That's all they care about. And so often the experience in those worst moments is that for the other guy, it's about the money. For me, it's about doing the right thing. It's about honoring my deceased parent. It's about fairness. The truth is, at some level, it is about that kind of deeper stuff for everybody, but it's really hard to separate the money from those other kind of deeper values. And so the money ends up mattering a lot because it represents dad's love, or it represents fairness. And that's where a good conversation can sometimes help everybody get all their needs met. My sibling now sees that I wasn't trying to screw him. I was just really honestly doing what I thought dad wanted. And now you understand me, and you're not accusing me of anything dishonest, because I didn't mean to do anything dishonest. The air can get cleared, that sort of thing.
Right.
So I guess the misconception there is that this is just about the money. These people will never get along. Forget about that. Let's just negotiate a deal. Everybody should walk away mad. They're going to be mad because they aren't going to get everything they want, but at least it's over. And so I guess that's the biggest misconception. I'd like to spread the word. It doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be just a bad deal that everybody's unhappy with. It can be something that people genuinely feel some healing around. That can happen.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Can you tell us of a story of maybe a case that's gone wrong?
Yeah, that's a good question. Those are the more interesting ones. I mean, I should say that despite this optimistic stuff I've been saying about how it can be very healing. On the other hand, these things do sometimes run very, very deep. And there's sibling rivalry, for example, that's been going on the entire lives of the offspring. And people are kind of pretty attached to their take that they themselves have been a victim somehow of the other sibling. And I don't mean to disrespect people who see it that way. They're obviously they were right there. They experienced it. They know more than I do about what they've been through. But they feel like I've always gotten a bad deal from my siblings. They talked dad into giving me a bad deal in the inheritance. I'm going to get a bad deal. There's nothing I can do about it. I can try to fight for my dignity somehow. And, so sometimes those fights continue a long time and, our fellow lawyers who do the litigating keep busy and I can't even judge that. I mean, it seems to go poorly from my perspective and that it seems like people suffer a lot and pay a lot and
Right.
squander a lot of that inheritance, but they feel like they're fighting for something they believe in. So I don't even actually want to judge it as going poorly. This is people doing their best to do what they feel is right. At one level, it looks like it goes pretty poorly, but and I have to admit that I didn't appear to be very helpful. I may have spent a lot of time with these folks and there's no movement. And I do my best to do my thing where I facilitate and give everybody a chance to say what they want and hear each other. And they're like, yeah, no, I hear him. He's lying and I got to go litigate some more. And that's it. That happens
I
a
mean,
lot.
certainly it's not easy. Every situation is unique and every family dynamic is very unique, right? So,
Well said. Totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, what would you say is in your field one of the biggest challenges?
Oh, I suppose just in terms of my own preference to be booked solid, I keep busy enough, but there's some slow times, honestly. And, my sense is that one of the challenges is that I generally need all of the beneficiaries of the estate to agree to participate in the process. And sometimes one person wants to and the others don't, or two of them want to, and the other one says, no way. So that's a challenge. People have to agree with each other enough to agree to use me as their mediator. That makes it a little bit challenging. That's the main one that comes to mind.
Yeah. What would you say is the area that you enjoy the most about what you do?
I would say that I most enjoy, it can be very inspiring to see people who are really wrestling with very deep questions about their identity. Did my parents love me? Do my siblings see me as the decent guy that I'm trying to be, or are they accusing me of being dishonest? When something meaningful can happen and somebody can kind of rise above that a little bit and just kind of, accept their sibling as they are and say, listen, I get it. You're doing your best. What you did seemed to screw me out of some money, but I get it now. You were doing what you thought was right. I can forgive you and I can move on. Those sorts of kind of courageous moves that people make are just inspiring. Like it's just awesome to see it happen and my contribution, feeling like I'm contributing a little bit, like by creating the space for it to happen feels great for my ego. I contributed, but mostly it's just that I get to see people step up and do these kind of heroic things. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Tell our listeners where they can find you.
Appreciate that. Transformativemediation.com is my website. And I'm available to chat. It's easy to set up a 15-minute consultation with me on the website. Happy to do that for no charge. Also, people who want to learn to become mediators. I love teaching my class. I'm doing one in July in Santa Barbara. Still some space left in that one. I do a course online every few months as well. That's also fun. Yeah, transformativemediation.com. Also,
Yeah.
I should brag about my book. I'll, since
Yes,
giving me the
please.
opportunity, Stephen, I just came out a few months ago, Self-Determination in Mediation, the Art and Science of Mirrors and Lights. My good friend Tara West and I wrote that, and it really, we try to capture this philosophy of mediation that we both believe in so much, this transformative approach. And again, the inspiring thing, as I just mentioned, is just kind of getting to be there when people are able to step up and do these hard things and make these tough choices, but really live up to their values, which, believe it or not, even the people who seem the most petty and the most angry and the most selfish, they don't want to be that way. Everybody would rather be, they want to take good care of themselves. They don't want to be victimized, but people don't want to be victimizing each other either. And so that's the beauty of the work. You get to see people really step up and do the cool things that humans prefer to do.
Yeah. Tell everyone where they can find your book.
It is available everywhere. Amazon has it. It is, we got a great publisher that's helping spread the word. Roman and Littlefield is the name of the publisher. Again, the name is Self-Determination in Mediation. If they Google that, they will find it, no problem.
Yeah, very good. Certainly we can feel the passion in what you do. And thank you so much for joining us today. For our listeners, thank you for joining us as well. This has been Stephen Ting with Legacy Podcast Interview. We're glad to have Dan with us. We will see everyone again next time. Again, thank you, and have a good rest of your week.
Thanks for listening to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To find out more about Stan and Katie Beth, go to pinnaclelegacylaw.com. You can also find links in the show notes.